So what I got out of this movie is that Disney likes to show off that they own Star Wars now. Yeah. Tomorrowland is directed by Brad Bird, co-written by him and Damon Lindelof, and stars Britt Robertson, George Clooney, Raffi Cassidy, and Hugh Laurie. And the only thing I'm gonna say about the plot of Tomorrowland is what you saw in the trailer. So basically this girl, Casey, played by Britt Robertson, finds this pin. And whenever she touches this pin, she seems to be transported to this futuristic world called Tomorrowland, and she goes on this adventure to try and find out what this place is. Now, I was really excited to watch Tomorrowland solely because of Brad Bird directing, and while I can say that he still does a good job in this movie, and while there are good performances in the movie, it ultimately is a bit disappointing, mostly because of the writing. The visuals in Tomorrowland are generally very well done. The effect of seeing Casey touching the pin never gets old. It's still really cool to see. And there's a lot of creativity and imagination that went into this technology that you see in Tomorrowland, because the technology is like almost feasible, so it's really interesting in that regard. There's lots of fun gadgets and sets throughout the movie that, aesthetically speaking, aren't that varied, but at least there's like a sense of like cold utopian uniformity with all the stuff you see. The editing by Walter Merchant Craigwood occasionally gets really tense and exciting, mainly from the escape sequence in Frank's house and this future-predicting tachyon machine that you see in Tomorrowland. That's really cool. And in terms of acting, like they're all these main actors are really good. Britt Robertson is great in her role. She has a lot of charisma and inherent likability, and she really exudes this sense of wonder and curiosity that I really bought into immediately. And George Clooney, thankfully enough, does not just phone it in this movie. Like, he really does commit. He is able to reveal Frank's complexity in a subtle yet affecting way, I thought. And then Raffi Cassidy, who's this little girl who plays this android, Athena, she doesn't exactly steal the show, but I did think that she managed to hold her own, so she ended up coming off as an equal, especially amongst these older actors. And overall, these three main actors you have really have a great dynamic with each other when you watch them interacting throughout the movie. And Brad Bird still really does a good job directing this movie, especially with his action scenes. They're so wonderfully staged. Like, the way he uses like kind of like smaller enclosed spaces for action is really inventive. There's a sequence wherein Casey takes a tour throughout Tomorrowland, and I believe it's done in just one take. And it's probably the best part of the movie for me, because I just thought it was so well directed. And Brad Bird really manages to strike a really good balanced tone throughout the movie. You know, it's not too Disney-fied, it's not too kiddie. There's a lot of good humor thrown in there, but there's still a lot more mature violence than I was expecting. Unfortunately, I do have quite a few problems with Tomorrowland that really drag it down. For one, the uniformity of the production design ultimately seems a bit contrary to the very idea that Tomorrowland is supposed to be this haven for all these creative minds. Like, it's kind of strange that everything kind of looks the same and just all gray and silver. And it does take about 2 whole acts for these characters to actually get to Tomorrowland. And that's not necessarily a bad thing in itself, it's just that the way it's done here, it ends up making the first 2 acts feel really draggy and kind of slow. And as a result, the 3rd act feels really rushed as a result. And it's really evident that the writing, for me, just really fell flat. For one, like, they use this framing device throughout the movie. Like, the whole movie is a story being told by George Clooney and Britt Robertson's characters. And it feels completely unnecessary. There are too many subplots and character relationships that are not fleshed out well enough, especially with Casey and her family. And the character of Casey herself really just kind of ends up becoming a plot device after a while. Like, after a certain point, she's kind of useless in my opinion. And when you find out who the villain is, like, you don't really buy him that much as a villain, because they kind of just throw him in there. And it becomes evident in the last act that, you know, the writing is just full of like too much half-baked, like, preachy exposition. Like, this movie has good intentions, but when you start to think about like the message it's beating you over the head with, it doesn't make perfect sense, to me at least. But in the end, I'd still say Tomorrowland is kind of an okay movie. It has good intentions, like I said, but the delivery really just kind of falls flat in a lot of aspects. But yeah, that's what I thought about Tomorrowland. Have you guys seen it? What do you think about it? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Whatever you thought, whether you agree with me or not, please leave me a comment. Let's have a conversation.